Greetings and welcome to a Barstow Travel Adventure program. During the next half hour, I would like to invite you to share with my wife and me, by way of film, a trip to the fascinating country of Japan. In August of 1985, my wife and I had the opportunity to spend 8 days visiting this country way over on the other side of the Pacific Ocean. And part of the time that we were there, we spent watching whales. Now, you may know that during the last 40 years, Japan has been the host of the largest whaling industry in the world. In recent years, however, due to declining whale populations and increasing international pressure to bring an end to commercial whaling, the Japanese whaling industry has been phasing out. And the thing that interested my wife and me so much when we were in Japan was the extent of the growing interest by many people in Japan, particularly young people, in whales as a living resource rather than an exploitable resource to be killed. Actually, we were very fortunate because there were two people in particular that we had met previously here in the United States before we made our trip to Japan. The first of those persons was a Japanese professor, Professor Nishiwaki, who had been whale watching with us out of Boston, Massachusetts, at a conference that we attended. And we had met Mr. Nishiwaki and his wife there at this conference and enjoyed talking with them very much. Mr. Nishiwaki died not long after this 1983 conference where we had met him, but we had kept up our acquaintance with his widow, and she helped us a great deal while we were in Japan, as you will see from the film I'm going to show you in just a few minutes. The other man from Japan that we had met previously was a Mr. Hara, who was a newspaper reporter and an author. And he had come to this country and visited my wife and myself in our home in Wethersfield, and he also had gone out whale watching in Cape Cod Bay with us, and he wrote this book. He autographed it for me. It's all in Japanese, and of course in Japan the books start from the opposite side from that which we're used to in this country. But he, Mr. Hara, who wrote this book, is a very strong whale advocate, and we certainly appreciated getting to know him. As a matter of fact, in 1982, there were two representatives of the Japanese National Tourist Agency that went on a whale watching excursion out of Provincetown, Massachusetts, at the tip of Cape Cod, with a group of members of the Connecticut Cetacean Society. And I'd like to just, before we go to Japan itself, show you a few scenes that were taken at the time of this very special whale watching trip with these two Japanese tourist representatives.
Over the last 2 decades, Provincetown, Massachusetts, at the tip of Cape Cod, has become the East Coast Mecca for United States whale watchers. The dolphin fleet is the most famous whale watching operation in Provincetown, and every day during the summer months, hundreds of visitors embark upon 4-hour trips out into Cape Cod Bay to view the whales from the specially designed dolphin boats. On Macmillan Dock, it was our pleasure to introduce our two Japan Tourist Agency guests to Captain Albert Avalar, the pioneering boatman who had originated East Coast whale watching with the dolphin fleet back in 1976, to provide opportunities for ordinary landlubbers to have the extraordinary experience of direct encounters with these living giants of the sea in their natural habitat. Heading down the gangplank in their wet weather gear, the Japanese tourists, Messrs. Masatoshi Nagami and Tetsu Yamaguchi, were greatly impressed at the large numbers of people from all over the United States who were so eager to have this experience. After boarding the boat and before leaving the dock, passengers received a brief orientation talk by crew members and naturalists, including noted whale scientist Dr. Charles Stormy Mayo from the Center for Coastal Studies in Provincetown. On the way out to the whales' feeding grounds off Stellwagen Bank, Dr. Mayo provided detailed information about the whales and why they migrate from the Caribbean to this area of the North Atlantic during the summer months for food. It is always an exciting moment when the first whales are sighted, and everyone rushes to the bow and the rails to get a good view. These whales are humpback whales, gentle 45-foot giants who come to the surface every 10 or 15 minutes to breathe, expelling a spout of stale air from their lungs and then inhaling large quantities of fresh air through two large blowholes on the tops of their heads. Humpback whales have long white flippers which often can be seen underwater before the whale's head emerges. Sometimes they stand vertically in the water and just push their heads out in a maneuver known as spy hopping. They are called humpback whales because when they dive, they arch their backs in a great hump. The tourist representatives from Japan on this trip were impressed as much by the whale watchers as by the whales. They could clearly see the economic potential of so many people being so excited about going out on boats to see whales. They knew that whales can also be seen along the coast of Japan, so whale watching might become a tourist attraction there as well as here in America.
If watching live whales off the coast of New England can be such an enjoyable enterprise, might it not sometime be a similarly enjoyable enterprise off the coast of Japan? Well, this was one of the ideas that my wife and I were interested in exploring on our trip to Japan, and we found that there were a number of people that thought that might be so. And so now let me just tell you that in going to Japan, we had to leave from Kennedy Airport in New York City, and I'd like to take a look at the globe here. We started way over on the east coast of the United States, and then we went all the way up across the North American continent, up actually to Alaska, and then across the northern part of the Pacific Ocean, and finally down to the islands of Japan, which are off the east coast of Asia, Russia, Korea, and China. Now, perhaps I could show you a little more closely on another map over here of the main islands of Japan. It is an island nation, and there are 4 large islands there in the western North Pacific. We spent all of our 8 days on the main island of Honshu. And of course, the place that we went to first was Tokyo. Tokyo is the capital of Japan and their principal city, and there was just so much to see and do there. After a few days in Tokyo, we took a train, the so-called Bullet Express, and you'll see that in the film, across the main island here over to Kyoto. Kyoto is the second most prominent city in Japan, and we did a good deal of sightseeing there, including going down to the bottom coast, the lower coast of the island there, where we went to an aquarium, as you will see. We went back up to Kyoto and back again to Tokyo, and again we went down to visit another aquarium south of Tokyo, and then ended our trip at that time. So now, without further introduction, let's proceed with these whale watching adventures in Japan.
The two of us left Kennedy Airport in New York on a Northwest Orient plane that took us across the American continent with a stop for refueling in Anchorage, Alaska, and then into a new day as we crossed the international date line over the Pacific. We had been in the air for a total of 15 hours when we arrived in Tokyo and took the train from the airport into the city, where we had rooms reserved at the old Tokyo Station Hotel. As you can imagine, we were really tired when we walked our luggage from the station to the hotel. But all along the route we had found the Japanese people friendly and smiling and anxious to help these two American strangers find their way in this unknown city. We slept almost till noon the next day, and when we opened the curtains of our second-floor room, we looked out on buildings very much like those in any American city, except, of course, for the Japanese characters above the large clock on the building across the street. On our first day, we decided to take a bus tour of the city.
Good morning and welcome to Tokyo.
It's wonderful to be here.
We wanted to get some idea of the layout and principal attractions in this capital city of Japan. One of the primary tourist sites is the famous Tokyo Tower, Japan's rival to France's Eiffel Tower. This imposing structure, built in 1958, was modeled after the Paris Tower, but made thinner, lighter, and taller, so that this then became the highest independent steel tower in the world. Rising 1,092 feet, the Tokyo Tower is some 40 feet taller than the Eiffel Tower, and carefully engineered to withstand both earthquakes and heavy winds. From the observation platform, about two-thirds of the way to the top, one has a magnificent panoramic view of the sprawling megalopolis of Tokyo, from the harbor bay on the right, on across the city's heavily crowded business and shopping districts. With a population of over 8 million, Tokyo has more people than New York City, and is said to have twice as many taxis. The seat of government is the National Diet Building, built in 1936 of granite and reinforced concrete overlooking the Imperial Palace. On our way to visit the palace gardens, we stopped at a city park to enjoy the traditional ritual of the tea ceremony. Japanese society is held together by a high level of civility, from the respectful bows with which greetings are exchanged to the structured pauses in the day's occupations to partake in the peaceful respite of sitting still and sipping freshly brewed tea from delicately decorated cups. We were impressed to find this beautiful park maintained right in the heart of the city, with brightly colored ducks swimming around in a pond which also contained dozens of precious golden carp. On our way out, we observed a row of cultivated bonsai trees, miniature, aged trees kept in large pots. After the tour, back at our hotel, we had arranged to meet our Japanese friend, Mrs. Haruko Nishiwaki.
See you. So nice to see you. Tell us, what places do you think we should visit in Tokyo?
Oh, I should say Ginza would be nice, and Palace, Imperial Palace may be good.
That would be
so.
Wonderful to see.
So Mrs. Nishiwaki did take us to see the famous Ginza shopping district, with a modern glass-structured, neon-decorated crossroads which appeared to us to be a Japanese Times Square, perhaps even more crowded with a multiplicity of people and vehicles. We also visited with her the Imperial Palace, separated from the surrounding city by an imposing water-filled moat. The walls of the palace, with huge rocks, date back to the late 16th century. This is the traditional abode of the Japanese emperor, venerated by the Japanese with a heritage more ancient than that of the White House in America. The East Garden is the only area within the gates which is open to the public, but its carefully arranged patterns of earth and water, flower and shrub are very much worth viewing. The next day, Meg and I took the subway out to the famous Ueno Park and Zoo. At that time, the zoo's facilities were not as open and spacious as those of some more modern zoos, but student artists still found lions and tigers, even in their heavily wired enclosures, good subjects for drawings, and families still found it exciting to have their photos taken in front of the gorilla's pen. We saw many uniformed students touring the park, and then we encountered a big surprise. We had arranged to meet in front of the National Science Museum our other Japanese friend, the newspaper writer, Mr. Takeshi Hara. Here at this location we found a most remarkable outdoor exhibit, a life-size model of a giant humpback whale. Creating this realistic sculpture must have been a monumental task, and we learned that Dr. Masaharu Nishiwaki, the now deceased husband of our other Tokyo friend and guide, had served as scientific consultant and designer for this amazing humpback whale model. We were tremendously impressed and encouraged to see this awesome statue exhibiting the wonders of living humpback whales right in the capital of the world's leading whale-killing nation. We were also pleased to see how popular it was as an educational and photo site.
Well, it's so nice to see Mr. Hara again. And you'll notice that I have here a copy of the Mainichi Times, which is the newspaper for which you work.
Yes.
And I also have this wonderful book
Thank
about,
you very much.
what is the title of the book?
The whale.
The Whale.
Yes.
I wonder if you would be willing to autograph it for me.
Thank you.
You're a distinguished Japanese newspaperman and writer. What do you think is the opinion of the Japanese people now in August of 1985 about whaling?
We have two groups of opinion. One is these people think whales as a protein resource. It's a traditional Japanese food. And another group thinks whale as a wildlife should be protected. So we in Japan, the opinion of Japanese people are keenly split.
Thank you.
On the following day, Meg and I left Tokyo and took a 3-hour cross-country ride on the famous fast-speeding bullet train. It started out slowly enough from the Tokyo station, passing over crowded streets and densely populated living spaces. Out in the countryside, we were disappointed at not being able to see the famous Mount Fuji off in the distance there because of heavy clouds. We were on our way to visit Japan's second largest city and prime tourist attraction, which had its own White Tower landmark. This is the city of Kyoto, famed as a cultural and religious center, as well as being highly industrialized. We stayed in a modern high-rise hotel near the station and undertook several bus tours to various shrines, temples, and parks in the surrounding area. This impressive building is the Sanjusugando Hall, housing 1,000 wooden images dating back to the 12th century. Also in Kyoto, we saw a number of Shinto shrines with equally ancient histories, and everywhere we went, there were beautifully laid out gardens and walkways. These large circular stones winding across a pond particularly intrigued us. The most overwhelming religious structure which we visited in Kyoto was the monumental Chiyomitsu Temple, built high on a hillside with a massive foundation of rocks and wooden pillars housing a giant bell and giving a panoramic view of the city below. It was said that if you drink a cupful from the sacred streams of water here, you will live until you die. We spent one full day visiting the historic town of Nara, about 25 miles south of Kyoto, where our first stop was the legendary Byodoin Temple.
Is called Byodoin Temple of Uji. This temple belongs to Jodo sect in Buddhism and founded in the year
1053. This structure is reputed to be the most exquisite single edifice ever constructed by human hands. The adornment on the roof of Phoenix Hall represents the mythical phoenix descending to earth, making this spot a virtual paradise. Also in Nara, on a site where tame deer roam the grounds, we visited the Toaiji Temple. Here stands the largest wooden building in the world, the Hall of the Great Buddha, which houses the largest bronze statue on earth. We stood in absolute awe before this overwhelming figure, over 50 feet in height, weighing 450 tons, amazingly constructed more than 1,200 years ago in 749 A.D. It is traditional in this revered holy place to pay respects to nature's peacefulness by feeding the deer. Before returning to the city, we also observed with awe and wonder the marvelous symmetry of the 5-story pagoda at the Kofukuji Temple. Its ancient artistry contrasted sharply with what appeared to us to be the grossly unaesthetic monstrosity of the modern Kyoto Tower. After our bus trip to Nara, we decided to take a train along a scenic route to a southern seacoast resort town where we had heard we might be able to see some whales at a local Marine World amusement park. Shirahama is located on a spectacular peninsula, and at the beach-fronting Hotel San Rakuso, we were greeted personally by the young Japanese hotel manager himself, who even invited us to his own home.
私の名前は小山康弘です。My name is 康弘小山。ようこそ我が家へおいでくださいました。Welcome to my home.
It was a real privilege to view this beautifully landscaped private garden. And later, back at the hotel, Mr. Yasuhiro Koyama treated Meg and me royally with a traditional Japanese feast served while we sat on cushions on the floor in a special VIP guest room. Apparently, this was the off-season for his hotel, and he did not have many foreign visitors to show around this spectacular setting, overlooking ocean waters not far distant from traditional whaling grounds. The next day, we visited Shirahama's large Adventure World Safari and Marine Amusement Park, which featured a specially designed Marine World amphitheater where a widely advertised orca and dolphin show was presented. We would have much preferred to go out on a boat and watch whales in their natural ocean habitat, but whale watching at sea had not yet been organized in this part of Japan. The performance at this Shirahama Exhibition Stadium included consecutive high leaps by groups of 2 different kinds of dolphins, Pacific white-sided dolphins and then bottlenose dolphins, with commentary, of course, in Japanese. There were 2 orcas in captivity here, a small young killer whale and a much larger adult male. The juvenile had been taught to perform and to be ridden by a young woman trainer. The adult male orca was over 20 feet long and an impressive representative of his spectacular species. But keeping him confined in this small tank, condemned to monotonous, directed daily performances, seemed a terrible shame. His staged sound-making seemed more to cry than to sing. After this, we returned to Tokyo and made a final excursion to what was called the Miami Beach of Japan, the town of Inoshima, where we found another aquarium and marineland. This resort area on the Japanese coast, some 50 miles south of Tokyo, is a favorite spot for family outings. We were able to talk directly with the curator of the Marineland Dolphinarium, Mr. Asami Fujimoto.
Different kinds of cetacea do you have here now?
Now we have bottlenose dolphin, Pacific white-sided dolphin, false killer whale, and also rhesus dolphin.
That's quite a variety. It's an honor to be here with you.
You're welcome.
Again, we would have much preferred to see these dolphins not from the deck of an aquarium, but from the deck of a boat, watching them leaping and swimming free in the open sea. We realized, however, that for almost all Japanese people at this time, these captive demonstrations provided the first and only opportunity to see and come to appreciate the beauty and wonder of dolphins and to learn about different species, such as the bottlenose dolphin on the right and the same pool with the smaller Pacific white-sided dolphins. We ourselves had never before seen a Rizzo's dolphin, one of the largest species, mottled white in color, in contrast to this all-black pseudorca or false killer whale. On our final day in Japan, we had the awesome experience of visiting the famous Kamakura Buddha, a gigantic bronze image in a sitting position, the second largest Buddha statue in the world, exceeded only by the indoor Buddha in Nara. This outdoor Kamakura Buddha is nearly 40 feet in height and was originally cast and erected in 1250 A.D. For centuries, it has been a principal lure to both Japanese visitors and foreign travelers from around the world, coming to pay homage to and derive inspiration from this supreme embodiment of peace and eternal contemplation. And so, Robbins and Meg Barstow said sayonara to this land of many contrasts, ancient and modern, where this historic arch shrine serves as a symbolic gateway to both past and future. This is your host, Robbins Barstow again, and I would just like to conclude this program with a 1991 update. The pictures which you have just seen were taken in 1985, and in the 6 years since then, some dramatic changes have taken place in Japan. I recently received a letter from our Tokyo newspaper friend, Mr. Hara, in which he has reported to me that they are now planning whale watching sightseeing at 4 points along the Pacific coast. So that now we know that the Japanese themselves are undertaking to go out and see whales and dolphins, not just in aquariums where they were before, but out in their natural habitat. And we know that that is going to make a change in the whole picture there. And in fact, a recent poll, a poll in the spring of 1991, showed that a clear majority, 63% of the Japanese people, now believe that whales are animals to be protected rather than exploited. So it does appear that the seeds which we planted back 10 years ago in Provincetown, whale watching there, are now bearing fruit in Japan itself, and very soon, I am sure, Japan will join the other nations in the world in coming to value whales alive more than whales dead, and in giving up whale killing for good. Sayonara. Thank you for joining us for this Barstow travel adventure.
We hope you've enjoyed this Barstow travel adventure film. We'll be releasing more of Robbins Barstow's home movies on this YouTube channel during 2021. Click here to subscribe and receive the latest updates. Meanwhile, enjoy these other films by a master of home movie storytelling in the pre-digital era.